Okay. Dr. Gina here for WND, and I am here with Dr. John Lott. He wrote More Guns, Less Crime. Tell me a little bit about what your organization does and why you decided to write this book.
Right. Well, I'm president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, but More Guns, Less Crime is actually a book that I started when I was at the University of Chicago and did a second edition when I was at Yale. The third edition just came out in 2010. But I kind of backed into it. I've done a lot of work on crime. I was chief economist at the United States Sentencing Commission, and I was teaching a class at Wharton, and some of the students asked me to talk about gun control, and it forced me to look through the literature a little bit more carefully. But
Where did you stand at that point?
I was probably in the middle. I know my views have changed a fair amount. I think, like almost anybody else, kind of influenced by the media. When you constantly hear about bad things that happen with guns and never hear about the benefits, I think it affects anybody's views. But basically what you find is that just as you can deter criminals with higher arrest rates or higher conviction rates, the fact that would-be victims might be able to defend themselves can also deter criminals from attacking. And you find that the people who benefit most from owning guns are basically two groups of people. People who are relatively weaker physically, women and the elderly, and people who are most likely to be victims of violent crime. And that overwhelmingly tends to be poor blacks who live in high-crime urban areas. It'd be great if the police were there to protect people all the time. My research indicates to me the police are the single most important factor for reducing crime. But I think the police understand themselves that they virtually always arrive on the crime scene after the crimes occurred, and that's the reason why police so strongly support individuals' ability to go and own guns, because they realize in their own work how important guns are in protecting them.
So let's get to the nuts and bolts. The book is very heavily research laden, which is awesome. And but a lot of the questions people ask. You mentioned the police being basically a cleanup crew, which is how a police officer that I actually had I interviewed one time described what police do. They're not there when the crimes happen statistically. For people to have a gun, I mean, what do you recommend for that? What guns do you recommend as the best guns?
Well, for protecting somebody inside your home,
right.
A handgun is probably easiest to use when you're in a hallway or something like that. You know, probably higher caliber guns are good for stopping power. But, you know, to me, I kind of focus more on just the general issues, the concerns about risks of having guns in the home. I've done a lot of research on that.
Talk to us about that, because a lot of people say, oh, you know, if you have guns in your home now, I think in California, in some cities, you can snitch on your neighbor if your children report to you that that family has guns in the home, and you get a little visit from the police. But should those things happen in cities? Is it unsafe for families to have guns in the home?
I think it's unsafe for them not to have guns. Look, bad things can happen. I think they're constantly exaggerated, the risk that bad things, at the rate that they happen. You look at children under 10. Last year, the CDC has numbers for us, 2010. Children under 10, you have about 36 accidental gun deaths a year. But about 2/3 of those are actually shots by adult males, usually in their mid to late 20s, usually people who have criminal backgrounds, who don't have their driver's license at the times that they're doing because of DWIs or other things. And so it's the risk of a law-abiding household having accidental gun death for a child in the home is akin to children being hit by lightning. So it's something that happens, but you have to balance that off against the fact that if you lock up the guns and they're not easily accessible, or if you don't own them at all, the impact that has on families' ability to go and defend themselves. And you mentioned urban areas. You know, it's usually the higher crime urban areas that are most liberal on these things, and those are the very places where they need guns the most, where violent crimes, you know, a criminal coming into their home is the riskiest thing. You know, if you're worried about accidental gunshots in the home, the big thing you should ask is if you have a violent criminal in the home, somebody who has a violent criminal record. That's the real risk factor, not whether or not a gun is owned there or not. So you have things like ABC News, the end of January, just devoted several days where all their news shows were pushing this claim that there were 7,300 accidental deaths a year, or accidental injuries a year involving guns. What they don't mention is that about 80% of those were 17, 18, and 19-year-olds, overwhelmingly involving violent crime. So basically you're talking about gang activity. And it was very heavily black. And the problem is that gang problems are a serious problem. But scaring law-abiding citizens into not owning guns in their home isn't going to have anything to do with stopping gang violence out there. Instead, what ABC would do is they'd have a picture of a 3-year-old and talk over and over again about an accidental death involving a 3-year-old and not talking about the rate at which those types of things occur. You know, they give the impression that children getting a hold of guns and accidentally shooting themselves is a problem. But as I say, you're talking about 8 to 10 cases a year of something like that happening where a child under 10 gets a hold of a gun and accidentally shoots themselves or another child. It'd be better if that was 0. But you know, even some of those 8 to 10 cases are not what you'd call normal households also.
Was that the most surprising thing that you learned in your research for the book?
No. I mean, I suppose just how allowing people to be able to defend themselves reduces crime. And, you know, there's a lot of kind of misinformation that's out there. I'll give you one interesting fact. If you look at every place in the world that's banned guns, just not Washington, D.C. and Chicago, every time guns have been banned, whether it's all guns or handguns, murder rates have gone up.
Every time.
Every single time.
And then you have counties like Cobb County, Georgia, I think it is, where 1 gun per household, if I'm speaking correctly from memory here, and they have the lowest crime in the country, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, there are rules basically saying people are supposed to own guns, but there's usually out clauses that you have. So you can say, I'm conscientious objector or something. So it's not really enforced. But I think what it may do is signal to would-be criminals, this is the type of place that would pass a law like that. Yeah. And so that may give them some indication about who they're dealing with. But, you know, the fact that people own guns in the home protect even other households that would never even think of owning a gun, because the criminals don't know before they break in whether or not somebody's going to be able to go and defend themselves. You know, you can compare the United States to England. We have data on what's called hot burglaries. These are burglaries that occur while the residents are in the dwelling. In the United States, it's about 13% of burglaries occur while the residents are in the dwelling. In a country like the UK, it's about 60%. And they also have a burglary rate that's about twice ours. But the thing is, there's surveys that are done of criminals who have been arrested. And in the United States, American burglars spend about twice as long casing a home before they break in to make sure nobody's there. And when asked, why do you spend so much time compared to your British counterparts or other countries, they say they're worried about getting shot. In Britain, they're not worried about that. And so they don't care too much about making sure nobody's home before they break in. And as I say, you can look across many countries and you see that general pattern.
Compelling. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck with your book. More Guns, Less Crime is the name of it. Dr. John Lott, thanks for being with us.
Did you want to talk a little bit more about the
Yeah, well, if you're interested, just to tell you before.
Yeah, sure. Are we just going to edit it in, or how do we do this?
Yeah, I'll edit it.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So talk to us a little bit more about the campaign itself.
Right. Well, it's really amazing how things have been changing the last couple of years. former Mayor Bloomberg has put in $200 million to go and fund gun control research. George Soros is putting in tens of millions of dollars. Last January, President Obama met with 23 large foundations that have been involved in the healthcare debate and basically said, look, we've won the healthcare debate, he told them. Now we should focus on another issue. And he got them, like Kaiser and Wellness, to go and promise that they'd be devoting their money to pushing gun control type studies. And, you know, Bloomberg, he puts out these studies, they get huge amounts of attention. One just a couple weeks ago on supposedly 44 mini Newtowns that have occurred since the Newtown tragedy. And he was going after the media saying that they're not giving proper coverage to these things. But in the 44, they were including legitimate self-defense. You'd have East Florida State College had a case where a student was attacked by 2 men. One of them had a pool cue. Just in December, Florida courts ruled that permit holders could have their guns locked in their cars while on school property. He was able to get to his car, get his gun, and wounded one of his attackers. Bloomberg's groups count that as a mini Newtown. 40% of their mini Newtowns were actually lone suicides, virtually all late at night by much older people than would be at school. So you'd have like a 43-year-old committing suicide at 2 a.m. on the periphery of school property. That's counted as a mini Newtown. And you would include even shootings off of school campus. You have others, and that got, if you do a news search on it, that got over 2,000 news stories on it after it was released. All of them basically uncritical. Bloomberg had another study that went and claimed that as a result of an amendment in '96 but the NRA sponsored to the federal budget, limiting CDC pushing for or advocating gun control, they were claiming that that silenced science out there on firearms issues and that there was a precipitous drop. The thing is, the number of firearms studies actually have gone up, have actually almost doubled since then. But what's happened is medical journal studies have gone up even more, and they didn't, while they talk about the number of studies, they actually measured firearm studies as a percentage of all medical journal studies. And the share fell, even though the absolute number went up. But again, you'd have like 2,000 news stories, more than that, out there basically uncritically reporting what Bloomberg said, that, you know, the NRA had silenced research on the topic, which is just false. And, you know, you had another study that just came out a couple weeks ago on Missouri that was also funded by Bloomberg, claiming that when they got rid of universal background checks in Missouri, murder rates went up by 17% relative to the rest of the country. And that's true, but in the 5 years beforehand, it had actually gone up 32% relative to the rest of the country. So it actually gone up more slowly after the change than it had gone up before.
So your point is that basically they're skewing data to make a...
well, sometimes they just make up data. Sometimes they selectively
cherry pick. Worse than skewing. They're actually just making it up.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, it's amazing, but the media just continually uncritically reports this. And so I've started the center, the Crime Prevention Research Center, and you can get information on all these points by going to crimepreventionresearchcenter.org. And you'll see just how, because, you know, if they control the data, you know, and making these things up, and the media just reports this, they're going to affect the debate in a serious way. And the thing is, there's really been nobody on the other side. You know, you talk to people at the NRA or whatever, and they'll say, we can't really do this type of research because the media won't take them seriously. You know, they'll say it's kind of like tobacco companies doing some study on tobacco. And so, you know, but people don't, unfortunately, view Bloomberg with the same biased agenda from the other side, and the media, you know, isn't
critical. It's only biased if it's on the right side.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so, and give us that website one more time.
crimepreventionresearchcenter.org.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.